Hey, good evening. Wednesday, October 9th, 2024. Where has the year gone? Thanks for stopping by. I am TC, and this is MBRR Pod, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment Podcast. And I'm pleased that you're watching this, if you are watching this. Sorry I didn't give much notification that this was going to come out, but we're going to do a little jibber jabbering here a little while we're waiting for people to get notifications and see if anybody streams into the stream. So yeah, that's what we do, right? While we're at it, while I'm at it, while I'm talking to myself, just wanted to give everybody a reminder that a special thanks goes out to hey Juggalasis. A special thanks goes out to IMAF from Subscribestar AVA. Good to see you. IMAF from Subscribestar, who is a show producer from Subscribestar, and also to the Angry Vet Tav Kevin from here in YouTube, who has earned the show producer credits for everything that he has done. And there again is not to slight any of the other channel members or any of my subscribers, but those two have really stepped up and helped with the production of content, and I'm very thankful. I'm going to be scheduling a STD. It's always nice to have the clap. I'm going to be scheduling another community members chat coming up here, probably in the either this weekend or next weekend. I haven't decided which day I'm going to do that on. Maybe this Saturday or Sunday. We'll see, after one of my now infamous chicken streams. Hey, Nikki. Good to see you. Thanks for stopping in. I hope you guys will share this out. This is going to be a slightly less sexy conversation tonight, or this evening, or whatever it might be for you while you're watching this anywhere around the world. Yeah, it's a very important one, because I do make the distinction a lot, and I'm sure that those of you that are regular viewers or regular listeners will definitely appreciate my explanation. I am going to give you guys a brief update while we're at it. Still no update from the Rochester, Minnesota Police Department as of close of business today from them about the state trooper who it has now been over 3 weeks since the last state trooper accident here in Rochester, Minnesota, and we still don't know anything about the investigation. And I am waiting to be proven wrong on this, but the longer that it goes without any report or any update, the more likely I am to believe that there is something there with the trooper. I'm more likely to believe that the trooper had some fault in the accident or did something negligent to contribute to the accident. And I say that because, as we know, law enforcement, when it's investigating itself, even if it's one agency investigating another agency, they take their sweet time coming to a conclusion and getting to the bottom of a situation, almost without fail. And so, like I said, still no updates as of the close of business today that I could find. No news means they have something to hide. It's just the way, yeah, I absolutely feel that way. And I've yet to have any situation arise where that hasn't been proven to be true. So, not drawing any conclusions. I'm not saying, with any certainty that is absolutely 100% true. But I do believe that the pattern recognition is there if you're picking up what I'm putting down. So, well, we'll just wait to see on that. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow night. Actually, if one of the channel mods could, I'm spending way too much time near Canada. I don't know. Yeah. Anywho, if one of the channel mods could go in and grab the link for the wedding tomorrow, that would be great, and just put that here in the chat. Now I will be sharing that through the community page as well. But tomorrow night, I am going to be streaming the wedding between Samantha and Nate and Samantha, excuse me. Nate and Samantha tomorrow. It's starting 6:15 Central Time, and those of you who don't know, Samantha was the one who was arrested on her private property in her driveway, trying to escort her autistic teenage son into the house safely around a traffic stop that was taking place on their private property. And so, yeah, Samantha was arrested for that and is still pending charges, or still pending trial. And that wedding is tomorrow. So let's get down to it, because I just did this update to you, or for you, about the Rochester, Minnesota Police Department and their ongoing investigation into the Minnesota State Patrol. And that actually ties into why I make the definitions the way that I do, or use definitions the way that I do. A lot of you have heard me correct people when they say, "Oh, government this, government that," and you'll hear me say, "No, well, it's the state." And you've heard me on my own streams. I do use the terms interchangeably at times, depending on who I'm talking to. But I'm trying to get people to stop thinking about government the way that they do. I want people to understand that the problems that we have are not with government. The problems that we have are with the state. That's capital S-T-A-T-E. The capital state. And there are varied levels of the state. You have the federal state, you have the state, you have the county state, the municipal state, or the city state, if you will. And there was a time where what we had was governance, but that time really died out under, in my estimation and by my assessment, governance died under Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was the death of government. He was the death of governance, because what he did with many of his actions during the American Civil War, which, by the way, we're going to be doing some definition about what Civil War is versus Revolution versus wars for independence. What the United States fought in in the 1860s was not a civil war. It was a war for secession. It wasn't even a war for secession. The southern states seceded peacefully, and the northern states said, "No, you don't." But in particular, it was Lincoln who said that. And when he did that, he seized power and gave all the power to the centralized state, and absolutely destroyed governance and replaced it with statism. And that's why it's so powerfully important for people to start to understand that. When we look at the Declaration of Independence, when we look at the Constitution, and we are talking about government by the people, for the people, of the people. That's why what we have today is not government. We have state, because we are not governed by we the people. We no longer govern ourselves. We are now governed by oligarchical, despotic, fascistic, hierarchical bureaucratic mechanism that has rendered self-governance and rendered actually even voting nearly say flaccid. It really, let's just be honest. Voting is as useful as a flaccid male member when it comes to producing anything quality. And that's why, you know, the two-party system has, you know, really taken off in, you know, since the 1860s, is that it's terribly conducive to the state is what it does. Is it produces for the state more statists, and the people who run for office, especially at the level, are completely adherent or obligated to the state for everything that they do. And so what we're struggling with today, why so many people who are in the accountability activism mindset, you know, whether it be First Amendment auditors, Second Amendment auditors, people who, you know, go to city council meetings and speak about different problems and issues that arise. The reasons we're having the problems that we're having are because of statism, because of the state. And nowhere is that more powerfully evident than ultimately, you know, in your own neighborhood, and like right in your own cities, in your own towns, in your own communities. Your city council, your mayors, your township board, your town board, whatever the case might be, is where you can see the state being so dangerous and so overblown. And you know, I'll use the example of my own, you know, community, the town that I live in. And I did a very short show about this at one time. But back at the end of the year last year, you know, maybe late fall, there was an ordinance that was proposed and passed, and that ordinance was specifically brought about because there was a neighborly, and when I say neighborly, I don't mean it was a good-natured one, but there was let's call it a neighborhood dispute. One neighbor didn't like the other neighbor, and they were looking for any reason they could to really make the life of the neighbor they didn't like as hard as possible. Well, in this case, the neighbor that was the target of this new city ordinance being passed is a military veteran, and he's got PTSD, and he's trying to deal with that. He currently is not able to work, and he can't drive. And you know, we're talking about a person who, regardless of what your views are on the last 20-some years of this stupid global war on terror, is illegal invasion of sovereign nations by the United States regimists. He served the Republic and came back damaged because of that. And one day he was riding his riding lawnmower in his yard, and one of the wheels of his lawnmower touched his neighbor's yard and left a tire print in his neighbor's yard, and that is what started the dispute. And they started to complain that he would ride his riding lawnmower around the neighborhood or downtown or whatever, and at all hours of the night, and it was disturbing the neighbors, and they wanted something for a noise ordinance. And so they went to the city council and they started to make demands. But they just wanted this noise ordinance for their neighborhood. For their neighborhood. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, that's what city council is there to do. It's to hear disputes and to come to some sort of resolution. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that on its face, but what I would disagree with is that they have an obligation to act. Like, a good city council in this situation would have looked at, and I have an ally on the city council, somebody that I trust, who agrees with me on this, and was just mind blown that this happened, that it played out the way it did, not the way I'm going to describe here. The city council and the mayor, who should have looked at this neighborhood and said, get your crap together, get along, and recognize that this guy might need help. He's a veteran. He might need a little bit of help. He might need some compassion. He might need some empathy. He might need some understanding. So instead of being upset with him and targeting him with the power of the local state, of the municipal state, pull your heads out of your collective asses and do something for your neighbor. No, instead, these people, being who they were, having kind of a reputation in town of being part of the in crowd, went to the municipal state, the city state, and said, we want an ordinance. But we just want it for our neighborhood because we want to teach, basically we want to teach this guy not to mess with us. We want to teach this guy a lesson. And the city council, instead of saying no, said, well, we can't do a noise ordinance just for your neighborhood. So we'll do a noise ordinance for the whole town. And these people wanted the noise ordinance to start at 6 p.m. Oh wait, just think about that. They wanted the noise ordinance when it goes into effect to start at 6 p.m. every night. City council said, no, that's a little ridiculous. And they started it at 8. I think it's 8 p.m. And ultimately, these complaining people use the power of the state to set up a system to criminalize their neighbor for using or riding lawnmower in their neighborhood, and instead of working with him to do the neighborly thing and self-govern. And I don't, if this is making sense to you, you know, other than the trolls, I know the trolls will never understand this. But if this is if the distinction I'm drawing is making sense to you, please put a 1 in the chat. And if it's not making sense and you want a little bit more of an explanation, or if you think I'm just completely bonkers, put a 2 in the chat. And if you're just absolutely confused why there's even a difference between the state and government, put a 3 in the chat, and we'll do some remedial training after class. So, I need a drink. Well, I need a drink in more ways than one. So that's the nature of statism. That's the nature. What about a 5 STD? No, we're not putting any 5s in the chat. No. You could put a 5 in the chat by doing a $5 super chat there. There you go, STD. Oh, jeez. I'm terrible. Self-shilling. Hey, good to see you, Vigilance Committee. I'm assuming that must be Cliff, because Nikki's in the chat somewhere else, up above. So that's the nature of statism. And what, you know, so statism doesn't just create this heavy-handed top-down authoritarian rule. What statism does is it creates in the subjects of the state, it creates in them a mentality of servile, almost worshipful dependence is what it really does. And those things go hand in hand, because as Lincoln created this statist mentality, that all that matters is a strong centralized power, and all of these subsequent from the city state to the county state to the state to the federal state, and all those different, it's school board is really a form of who did the $5? Was that vigilance? Oh, Cliff, you cut up. I love you guys. Oh, jeez. Back from bathing the monster. Hey, AVA, we did not need to know that. What this, with the rise of Lincoln's strong centralization motif, and Lincoln was not a small government Republican, by the way. I want everybody to understand. The Republican Party was ruled by radicals, and they were progressives. And when I talk about progressives, they were very left of center as far as we would define it today. Lincoln created this mindset of the strong centralized government is what matters, and at the same time that was going on, there was a shift in industrialization and in the ideas and the motifs of education away from decentralized, localized education to a top-down authoritarian rule of education. And these things went hand in hand. And we're going to actually be doing a kind of a talk through of how the government-operated school systems came into being, and how they mirror a certain aspect of life and why that was so bad. But one of the outcomes of the rise of the government-instituted education was indeed drilling into students' subservience to the state at all costs. And that's great for some people. Like, so I use it this way, and unless anybody think that Republicans and Democrats are Cliff says this all the time, two wings on the same bird flying in the same direction. It's just sometimes one wing's flapping slower than the other, so they kind of like crab walk across the sky en route to utter tyranny. Republicans are statist as well, and Democrats are statist. And Republicans love the power of the state to invoke upon, or to impress upon, or to oppress their opponents in a way that will make these people morally good by legislation. And like, I do not like the argument you cannot legislate morality. Look, you can to some degree legislate morality. But an immoral people, even with legislated morality, are going to remain immoral. And so when we put a law on the books that says thou, basically thou shalt not murder, and if thou does murder, thou will do X number of years in prison, or thou shalt be yourself executed, that is not a law that man just created on his own and had determined that, oh, murder is bad, but how do we know murder is bad? Well, we've just decided that for society and for the community, murder is bad, and therefore we're going to have this law. No, a law against murder, a law against rape, a law against child abuse, all of those things are good laws, but they come from an abstract that's apart from man's own conclusive work. And so, yes, there's a place for governance, and that's why self-governance is so important. Yes, there's a place for governance, and we do need governance. But once you tip over the cart at the top of the hill and you get the apples rolling out of the cart down the hill, more apples are going to keep coming. The problem when it comes to the state. You know, you let the cat out of the bag, you know, situation. You just can't get it back in. You can't get the spilled apples back into the cart. Doesn't matter how fast you run downhill, they're just going to keep rolling, and you're going to miss them. And once you miss them, they're just everywhere. You can't fight the cat and get it back in the bag without unaliving the cat, which some of you may or may not be okay with, depending on how you feel about cats. But there's this reality that once the state was created, once the state rose up and it took over educating people, it had to educate people to be subservient to itself. It had to educate people to be loyal to the state. And the best way for them to do that was through the government-operated centers of indoctrination. You call them public schools. But I do and will continue to call them government centers of indoctrination. I don't care what your view of home education is. I don't care if you come at it from a libertarian perspective, a conservative perspective. I don't care if you come at it from a crunchy, granola-eating, hippie, bunny-loving, tree-hugging, radical leftist perspective, that you don't want your kids in those terrible places of bullying. Home education is the answer to the end, or beginning to the end of statism, which is why they don't want people home educating. Hey Eric, good to see you. They just do not want people home educating. They do not want people to have their kids in private schools. They want a monopoly on education, and they want to do whatever they can that's within their power, and they continue to grant themselves more and more and more power, which is why they fight against voucher systems, you know, ferociously, you know, tooth and nail. They have to, because they have to keep indoctrinating people with statist mentality, that you will do what the state says, that you will bow down and worship the state. And so with the rise of the strong sentiment under Lincoln, and then the rise of government centers of indoctrination and education, there became this self-feeding monster of statism, and people began to view the state as the natural outpouring of the Constitution. And that leads us to questions like, well, what came first? The individual sovereign states or the federal state? Some people would say the federal government. Well, the individual sovereign states came first. The federal state only exists, and bear with me, the federal state only exists because the individual sovereign states give it permission to exist. And that's the way it should be. And that's the way it should be understood. And that's why for decades and decades and decades, up until the 14th Amendment, every state had its own constitution, and they were not beholden to the Republic Constitution, to the Constitution of the Republic of the United States. And that's why up until the Civil War, up until that time frame, it was always these United States, not the United States. It was these United States, and that's an incredibly important distinction. And there is a very clear definitional difference between those two things, between those two words. And that's where that shift comes from. And that's why I'm so stubborn about talking about the difference between the state and government, between statism and governance. Look, I know a lot of people in the circles that my videos circulate in find themselves saying, look, we can't have 4 years of Kamala Harris. We can't have 4 years of Kamala Harris. There are a lot of people who are adamantly in support of the Trump-Vance ticket, but there are also people in my circles who are supporting the Harris-Walz ticket. They're on board with that agenda. And the people who are on the Trump-Vance side of it are saying, look, like, anything but Kamala. Like, literally, just think about the number of times you've talked to somebody and said, anybody but Kamala. We know that Trump's not perfect, but anybody but Kamala, right? But I want to ask any of you, whether you lean Democrat or lean Republican, do you actually live the way, if you lean Democrat, do you actually live the way the Democrats vote? And if you lean Republican, do you actually live your life the way the Republicans vote? That's a very important question, and the reason I say it's important is because I can almost guarantee you not one of you who thinks that the only way to vote is Democrat or Republican, Trump or Harris. I can almost guarantee you that you actually do not live as a Republican or the way the Republicans legislate, and you do not live the way the Democrats legislate. And here's why. Because almost every one of you, whether you know it or not, you live your lives philosophically like anarcho-capitalists. You live your lives philosophically as volunteerists. You live your lives philosophically as, wait for it, libertarians. Almost every one of you lives your life as a libertarian. You don't have anybody beating down your door in the morning telling you when to get out of bed. Well, not anybody who's not in the military anymore. Jugs, it's a great question, and I'm not. This is not so much about who's running for office. It's about how the two-party system ties into statism, how they're inextricably linked, and how the two-party system feeds the state, and the state nurtures the two-party system. So give you as an example, Minnesota is a prime example of this. In Minnesota, this last legislative session, the Republicans and the Democrats got together to try and make it harder for third parties to be part of the process, the electioneering or the election process in the state of Minnesota. If you are a Republican or a Democrat in the state of Minnesota, you can walk up running for a statewide office, walk into the Secretary of State's office, write out your check, announce that you're running as a Republican with or without an endorsement, and you are automatically on the ballot for the primary. If you are a third-party candidate, you have to petition for statewide elections. You have to petition and get 2,000 verified signatures from people across the country, across the entire state. 2,000 verified signatures. And you had better make sure you have all your ducks in a row on those signatures, because the Secretary of State will do his or her level best to throw out any signature they can to get you below that 2,000, so you're not allowed on the ballot. And Jugs, that's a great question. Why won't they allow anyone else to run? They don't care if you run, they just don't want you on a ballot. You're in time for the end of the drive, Snarky. So the question is, why would why would the Republicans and the Democrats, who talk so much about how they don't get along and how they don't support each other, why would they all of a sudden get together to work on legislation to make it harder for people to run for office if they're not a Republican or a Democrat? And it's because, absolutely because, they are dependent on the state and the state is dependent on them. Absolutely. That's why. They have to fight against anybody else getting in. And that's why the question of going down to your local state level, to your city state, and getting yourself involved is far more important than who you vote for at the federal state level. I agree, Eric. There should be no parties. The founding fathers were absolutely opposed to the factitious, the absolutely factious nature of parties. Just absolutely opposed to it. And that's why, like I said, getting down to your local level, to your city council, to your school board, to your county commission, more than anything, and finding people who actually live their lives, bear with me, who actually live their lives the way they legislate. And consistently what you will find is that most people live in a libertarian style, an anarcho-capitalist style, an agorist style. And the powers that be can't have that. They cannot have you living that kind of life. They need you dependent on them. If they could, they would tell you what time to get up and go to work in the morning. If they could, they would tell you when to eat your lunch, when to eat your dinner, when to eat breakfast, if you even eat breakfast. And that's why when you hear me talk about the state, I'm actually talking about what most people call government. But I want people to understand that statism is disgusting. It's deadly. It's dangerous. It's a burden. And it can only be fought by people at the local level stepping up and demanding that statism die at the local level. And here's why. Because if statism can die at the local level, local elected servants can begin to practice what's referred to as the doctrine of interposition and the doctrine of lesser magistrates. And they can, ostensibly raise a middle finger to the higher levels, if you will, and tell them, no, we're opposed to you and we're not going to allow that to happen. And you can threaten to cut off our money, you can threaten to cut off our funding, we don't care, we're not going to do what you want us to do anymore. And we have to break that cycle. And that's why I talk about it so much. And I will say hello to the flock. In fact, I will take you guys with me to say hello to the flock while I go in to open the garage. And then I'll end this. We have to end statism. And that starts by you being involved at the local level, which is why my channel members are called Act Localists. And one more time, before I end this, and we say hello to the girls, make sure you guys head over to the Vigilance Committee and watch their panel tonight. Their stuff is always worth it. It's some of the best content on the entire internet. I'm not just saying that. It's 100% believe that. I'm 100% committed to that. And I will be watching from the treadmill, at least for a little while. As I wrap this up, you guys head over there. We'll say hello to the girls, and then you guys can go over and watch the Vigilance Committee. Let's go. Hello, girls. Come on. Where is everybody? Oh, all accounted for. 1, 2, 3, 4 big ones, 3 small grays, 2 barred rocks, and the buffs. All right. There, you guys got to see the girls earlier than this weekend. So Until next time, my friends, fight for your freedom, it is yours. Fight for your liberty is yours. Fight for your freedom, it belongs to you. And sic semper, Tyrannus.